Is Kirby Smart looking to special teams to get the party started in SEC play? We'll discuss.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldog football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com, use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your first order. And our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the NFL knows Athens gets those guys ready. We'll discuss, and how does Georgia lose players and coaches and still find a way to cook? We'll download about that too. But first, let's talk about the Dogs offense getting off to a fast start, but still giving Kirby Smart something to motivate them with. So Georgia didn't score a touchdown until the second half of the season opener against Clemson. And this time it happened on the first play against Tennessee Tech. Carson Beck hit Dylan Bell for the first of 5 touchdowns that included strikes to Arian Smith, Colby Young, Dom Lovett, Lawson Luckie. So Jarvis was the faster start as a result of the competition, or was it because the Dogs know this is a challenge from last season they need to address early this season?
I think it's a mindset. I think it's a play calling and getting your quarterback into the rhythm, because I think that how Carson Beck plays this year is going to determine whether or not Georgia is going to be able to get back to the national championship and possibly win a third one in the Kirby Smart area. So for me, I look at it from Mike Bobo saying, hey, let me get my quarterback going early, because, we know he listens to the show, right? We already established the fact on the Bulldogs postcast that he listened to the show and he took our advice and said, hey, let me get my quarterback in rhythm, because that's how this offense is going to flow. And then we can pound and ground and pound and so we can get home and get to the after party and have a good time. And, of course, take Uber home. We won't need no more issues. So, for me, that's how I look at it from the standpoint of it's just a mindset, regardless of opponent, because we know the Bulldogs, they were favored, by 53.5 or something like that against the Tennessee Tech. So, of course, they did cover that aspect of it. I just think that it's getting your players with the mindset to have that right mindset, regardless of who you're playing. And with them going into SEC play, getting your quarterback going early and often is going to definitely help once you against Kentucky and once when they go to Tuscaloosa on the
28th. Right. And what about you, Brian? Do you feel like this was more of a start that was a result of the competition, or was it, like Jarvis was saying, just the Dogs knowing this is a challenge that they had last season that they don't want to have to face this season? They just want to get down and get started early and then just hit often.
I do think it was a result of the competition a little bit, but it was also a concerted effort, to Jarvis's point, of getting back, just getting the ball out quickly. Let's get it into our playmakers' hands. Let's get it to ETN early. It was nice to see that shot to Dylan Bell be the very first play. Like, I know it wasn't like too deep of a throw, but just the fact of, all right, maybe getting something downfield, because that's what I wanted to see. Mm-hmm. I think like East and West, this team has something going on right now, but it's more of like middle of the field, downfield. Can they really attack down the field? Because, yeah, sure, can Georgia probably wear you out from east to west and use the depth and all of that? But when you go up against a Texas and an Ole Miss and Alabama later on in the year, it's like that all is not going to work for what those teams are able to do. The other thing that stuck out to me is even before the offense stepped on the field was that punt return from Anthony Evans, just setting them up right away. I mean, that put juice in the building, not that they needed it against Tennessee, but seeing him in open space as a guy like, how do they get him the ball more? Because the ball is being spread out so much right now to all these different receivers that it's kind of like, I want to see more of Anthony Evans with the ball in open space, because he's on the very short list of like, all right, just find a way, manufacture touches for him. Like what they're doing with Arian Smith right now, I wouldn't mind if they go ahead and start doing it with Anthony Evans.
And to your point, to add on top of that, right, Kirby, well, not Kirby, but BG, those are some of the things that Kirby is a big proponent of. Special teams. We know how big those special teams can be when you're in those big games, when you're in your SEC opener, when you're in the SEC championship, national championship game. We understand special teams can sway the game. Like you said, it got the crowd going, it got everybody going, and then next thing you know, hey, Mike Bobo was saying, hey, let's be aggressive here, Carson. Let's find Dylan Bell on this. What, the 22-yard throw? Right, perfect throw right into the end zone, right into his hands, and then hey, you're up 6-0, going for the extra point, and Tennessee Tech is saying, oh yeah, we're in for a long day today. So I think that type of start and starting with special teams, we know how big Kirby is on teams. It just kind of embodies how they should start, how Bulldogs should start, and how you should expect them to start, going forward.
And as we know, Kirby Smart will still find something he wants to improve, even when his offense racks up 48 points. That starting offense didn't punt Saturday. Beck tied a school record with the 5 touchdowns, but after not being able to put points on the board against Clemson in the 2-minute drill, Georgia came up empty against Tennessee Tech with 45 seconds to work with. So for you, Brian, what can Georgia do to better execute in those situations?
Yeah, that's one of those ones that Kirby was actually frustrated after the game, sitting in the press conference and listening to him. You could just tell. And it was, for him, it was just an execution thing on all fronts. He wouldn't necessarily blame, it's always a team thing. Beck could have thrown a little bit sharper. The route could have been a little bit better. We could have blocked a little bit more. So that was I don't really know the full answer right now. I need to go look at the film myself to see exactly what happened in those spots. But those are going to be key. And I think those are important. Like we talk about special teams, 2-minute drill. Like this is how you win national titles as you get further along. So it's something that they're definitely going to have to key in on and know what they're going to do. I think my biggest thing is, okay, the ball's been spread out to all these different receivers, all these different backs are being used. But when you're in that 2-minute drill, who's the guy? Because I still don't think we know what that answer is or what that question is. It's like, you have the options, but also even just on the offensive side, like, it's good for the defense. We got to cover all these guys, right? But on offense, it's kind of like, I know I can throw it to Dylan Bell, Colby Young, whatever it is. I think it would be good to almost narrow it down to 2 or 3 guys to say, hey, we need to focus on these guys in the biggest situations. And I think that's going to help this team as they move along.
Yeah, the thing for me is you got to look at where the offense is right now, and then what it's going to be. I feel like you have to work your way into it because we understand the talent, gap, in these first couple of games. Now, Clemson was able to match up defensively, but we understand what the advantage that the Bulldogs had, on the defensive side of the football against the Clemson Tigers. So I feel like there is that offense. Who's going to be the guy? I feel like the red zone guy is Colby Young. I can probably put some money on that, right? So I think, between the 20s, can it be Dylan Bell? Is it going to be Dom Lovett? I deemed him as the guy that can get 1,000 yards this year. I don't know how that's going to necessarily play out. They play 17 games. You could probably get there, So I think that, that's the situation I feel like it's just going to have to play out as it goes. And to be honest with you, I feel like I wanted to be that way because I never want a guy like Carson Beck, who was about to get ready to go into the NFL, to force feed guys, try to get guys the ball because he understands that, hey, this is my go-to guy between the 20s, so I got to get him the rock. I don't want him to do that. I want him to be able to go through all his progressions. Hey, check 1 is not there. Let me go to my 2. If 2 is not there, let me go to my check down to get to Trevor Etienne and see if he can do something out of the backfield. So all those things just going through the process, and I feel like it'll play itself out, like I said. But I feel like early on, definitely it's Colby Young in the red zone. I feel like he's a weapon. We acknowledge that, and even in the spring.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's a matter of it may not be a bad idea, rather, that they are spreading the ball out, because I think that they've been fortunate the first couple of weeks. They really haven't had any major injuries in that, we'll call it the pass catcher room, if you will. So I think when you look at the fact that, hey, they kind of got fortunate in that regard because there are no major injuries coming out of there, I think this also lets everyone know, like, hey, if for some reason someone goes down, any of these are capable of being what we'll call wide receiver 1, right? And so I think that might be a good thing as well. To your point, Jarvis, as they're kind of playing it out. And to your point, Brian, they haven't really figured out who that guy is. Maybe they can continue like kind of evolving that and determining who that wide receiver 1 is. But on the same token, who wide receiver 2 is, who wide receiver 3 is, and then who can move up should something happen to wide receiver 1.
Yeah, and Carson Beck after the game, to that point, was just kind of saying, like, I'm not even sure if we have a true number 1 wide receiver in that way. He sounded it was just verbatim like what Kirby would say after the game, and he was like, I don't know, we got a bunch of 1s, we got a bunch of 2s, we got a bunch of guys that can make plays. Like, I don't care, because it was kind of in reference to, all right, you threw the 5 touchdown passes. Did you want to try to break that school record and get to 6? And he was like, I don't care. I don't care if we run the ball in 6 times. I don't care if we pass the ball 6 times, whatever it might be. And then that follow-up was kind of on these wideouts. And he was just like, we just got a bunch of guys that can go. And yeah, they not have that one type of guy who's going to be a top 10 or top 15 pick, but they're going to have a bunch of guys that are going to go round 2, 3, 4 and that. And that's also kind of been a known strategy too from Georgia as we are in this NIL era and how much wide receivers are on the market reportedly. After quarterbacks, they're right there as pretty much the highest position. And Georgia's taking the stance of like, all right, we're just going to get some really, really good wide receivers. We're not going to get the best because we might not be able to afford to pay that compared to some of the other schools that are able to do that. So,
yeah, that's a good call. But you know what? The fact that they have so many weapons and the fact that, like you said, they can go in the 2nd round, 3rd round, and we know how many of them went in the 1st round as well. It just confirms that the NFL knows too that Athens gets those guys ready. We are going to go between the hedges to discuss. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs Edition, is brought to you by Ultimate College Football GM. So, hey, Locked On Bulldogs fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you are going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. So can you imagine actually being the head coach of UGA? Yep, you are Kirby Smart. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the game. So Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play it on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Bulldogs fans. Use the promo code Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a great start. Just download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC, begin your coaching legacy today. All right, guys, Kirby Smart said, quote, the NFL could care less about stats. Can you play winning football? Smart also said NFL scouts consistently tell them that players who come out of UGA are so much better prepared for the rigors of pro ball. So, Brian, for you, what's your best example of a player who is so prepared that you've seen a big jump from last season to this season that also says they can get to the point of being NFL ready?
For me, I look in that tight end room and I look at Lawson Luckie. I thought in the Orange Bowl last year, I thought physically he kind of got manhandled in certain situations. No one really saw that because the game was 63-3, I think was the final in that one. I can't even remember. It was a bigger blowout in the Orange Bowl than it was against Tennessee Tech on Saturday, if that puts it in perspective at all. But for me, I just think his physicality has gone up another level. Oscar Delp left that game on Saturday with an ankle injury, which provided a few more opportunities there for Lawson. And Delp's fine, by the way. Kirby updated everybody yesterday. There's a couple people that got banged up in that game, and he just held out for precautionary and kind of obvious reasons going up against Tennessee Tech. But for me, I think going into, and he's going to be here obviously another year as well, but I think he can develop himself towards being a 1st or 2nd round tight end eventually going into the NFL, because he made the biggest leap to me from the Orange Bowl to what I've seen so far in these first couple games this season.
Yeah, and for me, I got to go to the defensive side of football. Shocking, right? I have to go with a guy like Jalen Walker because when you think about like the skill set that this guy has, I think that Kirby has to really trust his. I'm calling the Kirby the developer, right? Because he has to really trust that because for you to sit up here and look at Jalen and say, hey, man, I feel like you can be this stand-up linebacker and be one of those guys, those Georgia linebackers that goes on to play in the NFL and have a 10-year career. But, oh, my gosh, when Michael Williams went down, against Clemson, and you saw Walker go up there at the outside linebacker spot, and, oh, my gosh, he just started to cause havoc. So when you think about it from that aspect of it, like when these guys get brought in, Kirby looks at those guys and projects out, hey, if you come in, become part of our strength and conditioning program, here's what we can do for you. Here's how you're going to turn out. Here's your trajectory. You can potentially be a X round, NFL draft pick. There are schools that aren't doing that really. Like they say, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to play here, more than likely you're going to start because that's just how, a lot of schools have to do it, right? In order to get these big time prospects, but not Georgia. Georgia sits up here and says, hey, man, you might be spending time with another 4 or 5 star prospect, and you still going to get drafted into the first round. I think about Quay Walker when he got drafted by the Green Bay Packers, and you just think about it from that aspect. It's like, man, Quay was kind of a tweener as well, in between, as far as from a linebacker standpoint. So when you think about it from that aspect, like Jalen Walker is a guy I feel he's gonna be able to take full advantage of Kirby the developer, right? Because he's right on track to be that next guy. And people are like, well, he only had 8-10 sacks in his career, and he had about 35 or 40 tackles at the stand-up linebacker spot, but he got picked in the first round.
Yeah,
it's a reason why.
Exactly. Or you think about a guy like Trayvon Walker, who literally skyrocketed. He got
we talk about him a lot.
Yeah, and I don't want to say 0 to 60 because that's not fair. He wasn't 0 and then went through, his final season at Georgia and then became the number 1 pick. It was like, he made a leap, but he just kept moving. And we can think about back then when the conversation was second round. Then the conversation became late first round. Then it became middle first round, and I'll never forget about 10 days out, dude is going number 1, and it was a shocker. But again, it's because of all of that preparation that he had in his days at Georgia that prepared him to show out and make the Jacksonville Jaguars believe that he could be that game changer for them on defense. So yeah, I think that preparation that allows you to see those big jumps that then those NFL scouts see, Kirby's absolutely right. Yes, they like to see winning football. Yes, they like to see stats, but they also like to see if you have a game that is indeed NFL ready.
Yeah, the Trayvon Walker thing is still going to be it's still shocking to me that he went 1. Like, despite we're a couple of years later, just the fact that it's still surprising. Like, wait, he really
I'm the number 1 leader in that club, BG, that they understand it. I'm the number 1 guy.
Unbelievable still, yeah.
There's no better example, like Jay brought it up there with Quay Walker, because when they were coming out, it was like Nakobe Dean was the guy, right? Yeah. He was the man in that linebacking core. And when it came out, I was like, well, Quay Walker, yeah, people, they love the measurables. He's going to go in the first. Wait, he's going to go in the first round? No one ever really even talked about Quay Walker that much when he was at Georgia. I mean, people talked about it, when they're deep diving on a podcast like this or something. But the casual Georgia fan was never like, oh, did you see what Quay Walker did? And now he's one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Along with, I'd mentioned to you guys before we got started with the show, you see this picture from that game on Friday in Brazil, and it's all these defensive players just from the Eagles and the Packers. And just, you look across and we're talking about guys that have the potential to be like all pro type players and that kind of side. And you look at that, it's like, and some of these guys were unheralded or not even looked at or viewed as big stars at Georgia. And now they're, perennial starters in the NFL and have a chance
Eric
to.
Stokes is one of them.
Second, third contracts.
I was shocked.
Yeah, that's a great call because when Eric Stokes was back in the game, first of all, excited for him just because of the challenges he faced on injury, but to see him make that impact, I think was really special. And even on the flip side with Jalen Carter, some of the commentators were saying, he had a couple of situations where he kind of jumped the play or whatever, but they saw the aggressiveness, the assertiveness, the ability to know what play was coming next. And that was sort of what they hung their hat on. So yeah, what Georgia's able to do is unprecedented, not just with winning championships, but also getting these guys ready. And as we always say, another recruiting nugget for one Kirby Smart. Now, Malachi Starks was named the Jim Thorpe Award National DB of the Week Friday. Of course, after Georgia's win over Clemson, Starks returned the spot of his first collegiate pick in 2021, snagged his sixth during the Dogs' demolition of the Tigers. He, of course, started at safety, but also played at star and was a finalist for the Thorpe Award in 23. So for you, Andy, is he the favorite in 2024?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. If I could just make a quick and short, brief answer, yes. I think that is, he is the guy that, you have to look to just from a leadership standpoint, just from a talent standpoint, because he came in at corner. Coming in at corner, he had an amazing pick at corner, and then he did one very similar to it, being in that, stars / safety spot. Like, and when you talk about what NFL defenses are looking for, you have to talk about versatility. Every defensive coordinator is talking about this in the spring, in the summer, about what players they're looking for, especially when you're talking about leading up to the draft and everything like that. So when you have a guy who can shine at those different spots, specifically at that star spot, because we know how important that is in NFL. NFL teams, 75% of the time, they are, defenses are 75% of the time are in nickel. So when you think about how important that is, a starting position in the NFL these days. So, and those guys get paid a lot of money as well. So when you think about it from that aspect, I think that he's definitely the favorite. Only guy that I'm sure BG probably going to mention is that probably maybe has a chance to at least be in the conversation is probably Caleb Downs for Ohio State.
Yeah. And that'll play out a little bit, I think. Caleb Downs, like the stats aren't there. The numbers aren't there for him. He doesn't have like the big, like gaudy pick that we saw from Starks, but his will play as they continue to go through Big Ten competition. So we'll see how that plays out. But the versatility, like you mentioned, being able to play that star position, being able to line up in different spots, and to have that, we always talk about it with Heisman, as far as that Heisman moment. Like, you can show that one highlight. Like, Starks already has his Jim Thorpe moment. Like, it's already if he doesn't get another interception all year long, it's like, we're going to show this highlight, bunch of good tackles, maybe a couple deflected passes. Like the tape's already there. You only need about 15 more seconds, like 3 more plays, and it'll be good. But no, I think he's the front runner for that spot right now.
Oh my gosh. And then to add to that, they're going to rewind back just a little bit, y'all. Y'all remember Georgia was in the running for Caleb Downs for a hot second right there, right? Just imagine if they had Caleb Downs and Malachi Starks on the field at the same dang time. If I could reference a old future proverb, like it is so crazy to me that, wow, I'm just amazed at what Kirby is able to do from a recruiting standpoint. And it's not like selling them dreams. He's being there's honest and frank. And like when I say, and I think everybody needs to hear me on this one. When you think about what athletes respect, they respect honesty.
Sure.
Like good or bad, whatever it is, whatever you're trying to tell them from a coaching standpoint, or whether it be a fan or a reporter, they can respect you being honest, because those guys are like, because they can smell BS a mile away. Trust me. And then if you're a snake oil salesman coming up in their living room, they're gonna be able to pick up on it really quickly. So yeah, Kirby is one of a kind for sure.
Yeah, and I think too that's why you even see prospects who have already committed to Georgia going out and being able to say, "Hey, man, you need to come here. You need to quit playing around, and you need to come here," because they're believing already. And then they're trying to get other people to believe. And then the proof is in the pudding. As we talked about, so many players in just one game in the NFL that we saw Friday that show you all of what you need to know about how special it is and how Georgia is continuing to turn to get guys like Malachi Starks to come into the program. Now, speaking of that, how does Georgia lose players mostly to the NFL and coaches who take on head coaching gigs and yet still find a way to cook? We'll break that down in Next Up. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs edition, is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. So if you're tired after lunch, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch, or if you have to tackle a to-do list. Sometimes you have a long list to do for work, your do-it-yourself projects, so you can check off everything off the list. But if you are going to do that, you need 5-Hour Energy, because 5-Hour Energy fixes tired fast. I am here to tell you, sometimes it can be a long day if I start off like I am this morning with our Dogs Edition show, and then I've got another conference call and another conference call, then I've got a WNBA game tonight. 5-Hour Energy absolutely hits the spot. And the cool thing about it is you have so many different flavors that you can choose from. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Those flavors you can find on the website: watermelon, tropical burst, grape berry, and more. Personal favorite, berry. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today, you can use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive $20 off your order. Now, this offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders either, but go to 5energy.com and get yourself a pick-me-up today. Locked on Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that is programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise. Locked on Sports Today also brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jarvis, Michigan got smoked Saturday. The defending champs lost 31-12 at home to Texas. Now, that performance makes what Georgia did in 2022. You remember what they're doing now with the loss of players to the NFL and coaches getting big jobs elsewhere. All of it is even more impressive when you saw what happened to Michigan. Now, of course, they lost Jim Harbaugh, a DC 13 player to the draft. But now Georgia still has Kirby, but they lost Dan Lanning, and they lost 15 players to the draft after 2022. And for that matter, continue to lose players, continue to lose coaches. But yet, I don't think you're ever going to see this year what happened to Michigan on Saturday. Why do you think that is?
Kirby Smart. He's still there.
What is still there, right?
I don't, because, I don't see Kirby Smart leaving to go anywhere, because it's not like he has aspirations to go to the NFL. Like everyone knew, it was the worst kept secret in the world that Jim Harbaugh wanted to go back to the NFL. So when he got that national championship, like everybody knew what time it was. Even coaches, from coaches to players, they like, oh, Jim about to go. Like that's who I come with. I rock with Jim, so I'm out. So I think that if Kirby, for whatever reason, were to decide to leave, unless he just retired and wanted to go kick it with Mary Beth for the rest of his life and kick it with his kids, I don't see him going anywhere. So as long as Kirby is there, Georgia's going to continue to do what they're doing.
Yeah. What about you, BG? I think it's just astounding because, you look back at that 2022 team and all that was lost, coaches and players wise, and this team still kept rolling and should have been rolling into the CFB, let's just be honest, into the playoff. But ultimately, they're back contending this year after losing even Adele McGee, if you will. And then we even saw, and I'm having a little blank there, but the Syracuse head coach, we saw what he was able to do. Yeah. Exactly. We saw what he was able to do in an upset win over Georgia Tech this past Saturday, and yet Georgia keeps rolling.
Yeah. And with Fran Brown, too. How about him? Talking his talk this week a little bit about being a physical football team. He's feeling himself right now, and rightfully so. Rightfully so, I mean, good start for them. Kirby's he's created this environment of come here, I'm going to develop coaches as much as I'm going to develop players. Like you come in here, I'm going to get you right for your next opportunity. You're going to come in and be a position coach. Guess what? You're going to be my next coordinator. If you're going to be a coordinator, you're going to be the next head coach at a Power 5 school. That opportunity that pops up is going to be for you. That's what Fran wound up doing. He's talked about it a bunch, how much Kirby and Muschamp have both helped him in terms of just staying right there to the side. So Kirby has done such a good job of, hey, players, coaches, whoever it is, come here and develop. On the flip side of it, Michigan, keep in mind that Harbaugh was there for a couple of years beforehand, and people wanted to get rid of him. He was recruiting at the same level that Kirby Smart was ever. So he wound up building a really good team. He found a quarterback. He's a hell of a football coach, and they kind of lightning in a bottle. Like, yes, it is Michigan, and they still recruit highly, but not at the level of a Georgia or now a Texas or even an Oregon or even an Ohio State. And with Harbaugh knowing that he was on the way out, like Jarvis mentioned, like these recruits are also saying, I don't want to go there. I'm not sure. There's sanctions over their head. Is Harbaugh going? And I feel bad for him. And he's just left with it all because then they have to have somebody there to hold the bag, so to speak, and just kind of like, all right, we're here. And this season, I hope it doesn't wind up getting ugly for Michigan necessarily. They got USC coming up here in 2 weeks. But what Kirby's been able to do from the coaching standpoint is really impressive.
Yeah, and impressive also to your point, BG, because think about it, other than, of course, the challenges that they face with the violations, the motor infractions and motor violations and that sort. But we're talking about some serious charges against Michigan this year that, like you said, are still hanging over the head of Sharon Moore, but that really in this 9-year stretch for Kirby, we really haven't had any of that coming out of Athens. So I do think that's impressive as well, that he's able to keep everything intact. And obviously he learned from the best, because you never really saw any of those types of allegations coming out of Tuscaloosa. So I think that also contributes a lot. The fact that, hey, it just stays real clean and it just stays above board. And even when it does those like infractions from vehicle infractions, if you will, Kirby still handles that in-house and that program keeps moving. Now, speaking of who kept that program moving, also up and down years, Claude Felton. Brian, you had the opportunity to cover the season home opener this past Saturday as Georgia celebrated the corner of Georgia athletics with the unveiling of the Claude Felton press level. Again, of course, congrats to Claude on his retirement, one of the best to ever do it. But how would you compare that press box to others you've been in?
I do want to just give a quick shout out to Claude because he's just the best. He's one of those people, especially in this media world, it's impossible to find somebody that no one can say a bad word about.
Yes.
He's one of those guys. He's just one of those guys. So it was funny because he did the little wave at the 20-yard line. some players come back, hey, it's the SEC champions from 02, like all these different teams. And then Claude was out there waving. And it was funny because Claude's the one usually helping somebody go to and fro, specifically Kirby. So it was like, Claude, we started to walk off the field, all right, who's taking me where? Where do I go? I'm usually the one bringing somebody somewhere. So it's awesome that they named the press box after him. So the radio folks and some of the writers and some of those, we have the TV folks in the 400 section. They're on the Claude Felton press box level. We are in the Dan McGill press box level, which is up there way in the corner in the 500 section. It's quite steep. You have a view of the entire stadium, if you will. So for those who have been in the press box before, it used to be middle. You were on the yard line, right, kind of about halfway up the stadium. It was outside, so maybe you'd have to sweat a little bit. That's the one pro about this new press box is it's got air conditioning, but you are way up there. I will be bringing binoculars next time to see all of the players. So it's a view we got to adjust to. Not my favorite. I kind of like the old one a little bit, but we'll keep it moving.
So I have to ask before we get out of here, BG, because Jarvis and I, we always compare the food as well. And I always felt like that UGA food for media was like top shelf. Is the food still top shelf?
So, and that's the thing. They still have, and I forget her name, and I apologize, but they still have this sweet old lady that has been doing it for years. So it was great to see the same people because I wasn't able to cover any of the games. I took a job on the West Coast last year and was out on the Georgia front. So I came back and it's all the same people. Besides Claude moving on, it's the same security folks, same folks doing the food stuff, and just the best people. They went with they had nukes. They had little nuke sandwiches and pasta salad and some chocolate chip. When you get the Tennessee matchup, that's when you get the Georgia chicken and the greens.
Oh yeah, they show out.
That's the one. Yeah, you got to know the home games where you're like, that's the best meal. So I would say the food was a solid B this past week. Pretty good, better than most, but they've got some better meals ahead for some of the better home games coming up.
Yeah, I got to give a nod to the Falcons because I think by far their food is the best of all the press boxes. But yeah, they're on one, especially when the Saints come here. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Bulldogs for your second listen. And be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party Thursday.